Folks, thank you so much for joining us today. And this is actually a very special session because it is actually the program that I graduated from. So if you are joining us, maybe you don't know where you are. Well, you're right where you need to be because this is the Winter Virtual Open House for the year of 2022, more specifically, the Cultural Studies session for our virtual open house. Joined with me today is Professor Josh Wasinenko. I also have Ann Pasek and Ashi Kilroy. And they are all wonderful representatives of the Cultural Studies and Media Studies departments here at Trent University. So this is going to go fairly smoothly. We are going to start off with a nice kind of presentation slash introduction, if you will, into the program by Professor Sinenko. And then from there, we'll go into a couple of student perspective questions that I have prepared. Again, for the students here, trust me, not going to be as hard as you think. And then from there, we'll see if we have any questions in that Q&A there. Now, if at any point you have questions about the program, you can absolutely throw those questions into the Q&A. And if we do get to the end of our session and we're not able to answer said questions, you can definitely reach out to us through a variety of different contact information that we'll get to a little bit later on into this presentation. So without further ado, Joshua, the floor is yours, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say about these wonderful programs.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much, Jonathan. So yes, as you've heard a few times now, my name is Josh, professor here in Cultural Studies. I'm also coordinating the Media Studies program, but I would also just introduce Anne because I think we're going to do sort of a back and forth kind of situation here. But I would like to start maybe by just describing what is the culture of cultural studies. I think there's a perception among students coming in that we take a very narrow definition to culture, as do other academic disciplines like anthropology, which would be the study of other cultures and have very specific approaches to studying that culture. I would argue that cultural studies in our department looks at culture in a really expanded view. We do look at historical patterns of culture, but I think mainly we're looking at contemporary cultures, cultures that are infused by technologies, cultures that have various dimensions. So we can frame these sort of cultural aspects in terms of social issues, political issues, artistic issues, practical issues. And so given that diversity and that broad view that we take, I think the main focus of the work in our department is really to evaluate cultural
It appears that your sound cut there, Joshua.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, yeah, this is my Bluetooth kicking into gear here. We also study Bluetooth. Okay, I'm not sure where I cut out there, but basically what I was trying to suggest is that given the sort of like diversity of this culture, we need a mixture of approaches. So it's not sort of like a bottom-up kind of approach that you would take in anthropology. We look at cultural artifacts, we look at artistic practices, but we also dedicate a lot of our work to studying different theoretical ideas. And so I would suggest that cultural theory is a really important aspect of what we do. I think in terms of how we deliver this curriculum, there's sort of two main tracks that we take in cultural studies. First is that we engage practical, collaborative, experience-based learning through workshops. So we have really exciting workshops in experimental film, photography, radio and podcasting, which is hugely popular, fashion, theater, and game design. In addition to that, I would argue that we also look at historical and textual approaches to culture. So we look at science fiction, for example. We have a number of courses in music studies, such as the Black Atlantic. We have a course in popular culture, gender and globalization, world cinema, text and image. The list really goes on. So as somebody who's been here for a few years, I love this place. It's a wonderful place to work. And you know, I hope that you would consider it in your considerations. Sorry, I'll hand it over to Anne now.
Sure thing. So I'll underscore what Josh is saying in that cultural studies as a department here at Trent is kind of like a big tent that holds many, many different forms of creative and theoretical inquiry. So you can kind of think of us as like the melting pot of everyone interested in cultural practice, cultural theory, and cultural production. Which means that you can kind of do it all, right? Like you aren't, as you would be in other universities, sort of stuck on a track where you are only studying music and your degree is 100% pure music theory or 100% pure music performance. Here in cultural studies, we have 4 streams for our undergraduate degree, which, you know, kind of roughly thematically package your degree based on your interests, but don't prevent you from being a little bit eclectic in your taste. So the first stream is called integrated arts. That's a word that sort of describes a broad approach to sort of a Bachelor of Fine Arts orientation. So you're doing photography classes, you're doing painting, you're doing experimental weird noise music, like I was mentioning on the call earlier. It's a really, really great group with lots and lots of workshops. There's also a literature and narrative stream. So if you have a sort of fondness for literature, but find that English programs are like a little bit too stuck in a predefined idea of what good literature looks like, I think you'll find a good home here. This is sort of a place where you could take classes on science fiction, on storytelling, on theater, and think across those similarities and differences about what is happening in the wild world of narrative. The third stream is called film and media. And that is a large bucket in which you can find courses on the history and practice of cinema, experimental cinema, but also like mass media and game design courses, both so very historical, very contemporary, both in the same package. And then finally, we have a culture and theory stream, which is, again, folks taking more the role of the cultural critic or art critic, really, really interested in sort of deepening their knowledge in humanistic theorization of the relation between culture and politics. So that might include courses on the effects of globalization on culture, or post-colonialism, or feminisms. So you read a lot of books about books, and then get to apply that in ways that are often pretty delightful. So 4 main streams. And then as a sort of secret 5th option, we have an option in theater studies, which is a partnership between a bunch of different departments here at Trent, including classics, English, and Indigenous studies. Basically, you take 6 credits in a pool of courses, and then you get a kind of special recognition on your degree and transcripts that you have this specialization in theater studies. So yeah, 4 ways through the program, and lots of ways to sort of mix and match between them.
Absolutely. Now, again, you mentioned there's essentially 4 different ways to quote unquote complete cultural studies. Are students locked in to those specializations? And more specifically, because I saw a question in the chat there, there's a student that was interested in maybe taking courses surrounding integrated arts, but they don't know necessarily if they wanted to fully pursue a specialization. Is that possible? Is it a flexible degree?
You can change your configuration as you go. So yeah, you can, and students often do, right? Begin in their first year with a pretty broad set of courses. We have a few intro level courses that our first years take that do sort of provide that foundation level theoretical rigor, and then also a broad introduction to all the different doors that they can then open as they move through the degree. Mm-hmm. And it is not uncommon for folks to change their specialization as they go, as they discover, you know, in their second year, a budding love of theater, or that they, you know, are super passionate about game design and that's where they want to spend their time. And this, again, is a kind of advantage of our program structure, right? Because you aren't stuck like changing majors in that second year, which can often really affect your time to degree. So because everything's under one tent, there's a lot to do under that tent.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sorry, just a follow-up question. The chat is asking a lot of different questions. It also kind of relates to what we're talking about here. Again, like you said, there's a lot of flexibility, which if you compare that to, let's say, a nursing program, right? It has a pretty rigid curriculum, quite literally has a section dedicated to nursing in the DNA building. But again, there's a little bit of fluidity when it comes to cultural studies and media studies. Where would students find themselves studying? Do they have a building dedicated to cultural studies? Are they kind of here and there and everywhere? Or how would a typical, I guess, first or even second year kind of schedule look like, if you don't mind me asking?
No, that's a great question. I think I also just wanted to maybe clarify something too, because cultural studies and media studies are similar but different. And they're both, I think, very flexible in the way that Anne described, but they're differently flexible, if that makes any sense. But to answer your question, Jonathan, I think, a first year experience would include taking some of those intro courses that Anne mentioned, Intro to Integrated Arts, Intro to World Literature, Intro to Media Studies, and basically see whether or not you have some traction with that scholarship and whether you can maintain an interest in it. I teach Intro Film 1 and 2, which are second year courses. But I generally get students who are really passionate about film, and they're really trying to figure out where they're going to take that passion. And students will go into all different directions based on the specific interests that they may have. Media studies is a little bit more structured in the sense that if you take a media studies option or media studies degree, there are 3 required courses that you take in the first and second year. That includes a computer science course called The Digital Worlds, another first year course, my course in the Introduction to Media Studies. And then in the second year, you take a full year course called Media and Society. But after you finish those requirements, students in media studies can basically take any number of courses out of 12 departments that we've partnered with. So if you're interested in gender, or if you're interested in sociology, if you have an interest in anthropology or international development studies, you can explore courses that we've connected with in those departments and look at media in a very diverse way. So it's kind of a different model in terms of the flexibility that we offer. But I think one that becomes very useful depending on what you would like to do with your time here. With regard to the locations, I mean, I would just want to say too, and Anne can probably say more about this because she has a lab there down at Trail College. But we do have sort of a home, which is not on main campus. It is downtown, and it's a smaller sort of place with old Victorian houses, and we have a few lecture halls and so on. But students who enjoy that space generally tend to stay glued there, and for 2 or 3 years in the remaining degree, they'll spend most of their time and develop a really dynamic community. And so that's where a lot of the humanities are. So it's cultural studies, media studies, Canadian studies, English, literature, and so forth. But I think students would also be, able to enjoy the main campus. We offer, I think all of our first year courses are on main, as well as some of the other larger ones. Anne?
Yeah, if you've never been up to Trent and Peterborough, you'll find that the main campus, our Simons campus, is beautiful, but it's kind of like in the woods to a small degree. Like it's at the edge of town, near a bunch of really beautiful nature trails and on the river. It's gorgeous. But I spend most of my time at Trail Campus, which is sort of Trent's campus near the heart of Peterborough, and I really like it here because we're close to downtown. I can walk to work, and we just have a lot of relationships with the arts communities that are just in a walking distance from us. And so yeah, if you're looking to be a little bit less in the woods, Trent also has that option.
Oh, absolutely. Joshua, and thank you so much for again for your insight, for your knowledge on the program, kind of sharing and giving us a breakdown as to what students can expect, I guess, for lack of a better term, to obtain from their degrees in either cultural studies or media studies. I do want to bring in Ash, though. I haven't forgotten about you, don't worry. Just to give a little bit of a student perspective in regards to the cultural studies and media studies department. You don't have to be nervous. These questions are very straightforward, if not pretty much based around you, which is good. I have my own reasons for choosing cultural studies, but I'm assuming that you also have your own reasons. So if you wouldn't mind giving, again, just, a quick introduction, the year in the program that you're in, and also why not only do you choose your program, but what you love about your program.
Yeah, definitely. So my name's Asha. I've been at Trent for 4 years, but I'm more in my 3rd year of cultural studies. And yeah, I've been in cultural studies since the beginning. So I chose it, like when I applied, I found cultural studies and it kind of brought me to Trent. Like it was the reason I came to Trent, not the other way around. And I think I was really like searching for a program that felt interdisciplinary and didn't feel, kind of like what Anne was saying, like didn't feel like I was super confined into a certain spot, but also I didn't feel that like I wanted to just take, go undeclared and take whatever and move around. I wanted to feel like I was kind of getting to know profs that I liked, or, had a community of students that were studying a similar thing. And I found that cultural studies was exactly what I wanted to be doing, which was sort of study popular culture, like take a bit of arts classes. I went to arts high school and I felt like I really wanted to continue that in my learning career, but I didn't want to necessarily take a practical fine arts program. That felt a little confining. And this way I was able to like take workshop classes and think about them in these cool ways that were sort of, yeah, they're like framed in a way that I really liked, and still be able to put on little performances and I've done the radio and podcast class. And so, for an assignment, like we make a playlist, or we interview one of our friends, or we had a little do a radio show. And having that balance of assignments was really important for me in succeeding in university at all, to not only write essays, but to have the opportunity to do an art project and write about like Carly Rae Jepsen's music videos, and write essays about these weird little niche pop culture things that I found interesting.
Mhm. Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought up, again, doing a radio show, mainly because it really showcases just how hands-on this program is. It doesn't really get more hands-on than quite literally going on the airwaves. So no, I'm glad. Honestly, I'm just glad you're here. I'm glad that you're able to provide this perspective as well. Now, did you also follow a specialization, or?
I didn't.
Hmm.
Honestly, like the specializations for me were kind of like, I knew about them, but I didn't necessarily like follow it exactly. It's possible that at this point I've got the credits to have a specialization, but I just like took what classes I found interesting. I think that in the chat, Grace and Laura was saying, I don't know if it got answered, but asking about in first year taking other classes and minoring. And in first year, Trent really likes you. I mean, in different programs, it's different. With sciences, there's a lot of things you have to take, but a lot of the programs allow for you to really take a lot of different classes in first year. So cultural studies, I'm pretty sure when I was in first year, there was you had to take 2 required classes of cultural studies. So I ended up taking more than that, but there's options to take lots of different classes, just to answer that question. And I think that's a nice thing about cultural studies, is that the requirements don't hold you back. I feel like I've always felt like some of my other, my roommates have felt really like, oh, I have to take this class. It's in my degree requirement. I don't really want to. Whereas that's never been a problem because it's so flexible. And I also just really want to take cultural studies classes. So it's never been a problem. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I want to say I'm the same, but I absolutely fell in love with image, sound, and media. I'm sorry, that Black Atlantic course really sealed the deal for me. But again, we're going to veer away from talking about your transcript for a little bit, and kind of dive down on, I guess, a bit of a more humanistic level here. There's a lot of students that probably have offers to media studies and cultural studies. And they're probably, again, super excited. Some of them might be nervous. Some of them might not know what to feel. So if I were to ask you to bring yourself back to first year, or even, I guess, the end of your first year, is there a piece of advice or pieces of advice that you'd like to give students if, they are feeling these ways about this, pretty big chapter of their lives?
Yeah, definitely. I think like the thing that I say a lot, which is kind of, I don't know, maybe a bit obvious, but I do think the cheat code to university is like, take classes that you think are really cool, and you will be like, this is awesome. And it's still hard to do assignments even when you think the classes are cool, don't get me wrong, but like when you are taking stuff that is truly what you want to be doing, you're just really excited to be there. And the people you meet are people who are like-minded like you, and you're like, oh, you also want to have this radio show. Or I take a lot of theater classes. I've taken a bunch, and I try to take a theater class like every semester. And sometimes that ends up being in Indigenous studies too, which is really cool. They have some cool arts programs there. And when the other thing is, in that first little section, the first 2 weeks of classes, I think in first year, you really lock yourself in and you're like, I've chosen my classes, you've logged on, you've done your whole thing. But if you go to a class and it's not what you're interested in, I always think like, I always change around my classes. I make sure that there's a balance of like essay writing and film or this or that. And yeah, it makes it really fun and great that way. And I think in first year, like that's the best thing you can do is just feel kind of excited about what you're learning about. And that's a cool way to meet people too and have a community here.
Mhm. Absolutely. Take something you're passionate about and find balance in your class schedules. And that might look different for some of you folks, but again, it is your educational journey, right? This is your undergraduate degree that you're working towards. And there are support systems out there, whether it's academic advising or one of our many faculty and staff members and professors. We're always happy to, one, get students into our offices, but two, we're always excited to kind of hear what plans you have for the future, what you're passionate about and kind of what you want to bring to fruition. So I'll definitely second Ash's point there, to really make use of all these resources around you, which is a very good point to end off of, because I'm going to bring it back to Joshua. If individuals want to get in contact with you folks, maybe they have questions about some of the courses that are offered, maybe some of the research, books, etc., that some of our faculty are writing about, how do they get in contact?
Sure. I mean, we all have websites for cultural studies and media studies. So each program has their own dedicated site. Of course, you can reach out to me as the coordinator of media studies. I'm sure Anne would be happy to receive emails as well. The chair of cultural studies is Hugh Hodges, who I think is universally loved, especially in this room. So he would be happy to hear from you as well. If I could just say, though, just following up with something that Asha mentioned about just the sort of the flexibility and dynamism of that first year experience. I teach a lot of intro courses, including media and film, and I get students from all over the university: biology, chemistry, anthropology, cultural studies. And all of them are there because they love film. And it's just like, it's actually a really wonderful experience to have in the classroom, just to dialogue with folks who have such diverse interests. And I think, yeah, Trent is a place that does that really well. So yeah.
Absolutely. Because we were able to plug that course in, I'm going to give Anne and Asha the opportunity to plug a course that they think students might want and or enjoy as well. I love putting people on the spot. It's the best.
Sure. So I'm gonna give you two options. One course that I teach in cultural studies is called Climate and Culture, and it's a long discussion about climate change and all the ways in which we've failed to solve this problem, not lack the technical solutions or because the politics are uniquely hard, but because there's like deeper cultural stories that go on with how we, turn on our lights and what we expect from the grid and each other. So it's a kind of useful soul-searching way of thinking about environmental problems through cultural politics. I think it's pretty fun. The other course that I'm going to teach for the first time next year is called Fashion and Power. And I'm a deeply unfashionable person. But I am going to run this workshop course on fashion because I want people to make garments that have them thinking about labor and about bodies and about all of the ways in which those things get contested through the contemporary fashion system. So the class will end with a fashion show of a sort, a very critical, smart fashion show, and I think it's going to be great.
I will probably reach out to you to find out when that fashion show is happening. Because I too have 6 outfits, but absolutely love fashion. So I'll definitely do that. Asha?
Yeah, just like Grace and Lara said, you need to already be good at sewing. And I think there's a good, workshop classes are really super open to all different levels, which is a cool thing about them. I think it's interesting that Anne's doing a class on this because I'm in a visual arts workshop this year. So it's a year-long course, and it's pretty, we're doing different visual art stuff. And a lot of people are doing garment and fashion industry related art. There's a couple people in their assignments doing these sort of fast fashion, thinking about fast fashion, I think, and thrifting and all this stuff. So I think that's interesting. and I think that, yeah, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, a lot of people take cultural studies classes as electives, which I think is always funny because I'm always like, okay, but I'm just taking them and getting all my degree requirements. Like, and there's people always coming in and I'm like, great, these are all my classes. But one of the classes, I really liked radio and podcast. I thought that was a really cool class. It's a really good workshop class that we got to be in at Trent Radio, which is a building off campus. And it was just a really cool experience. And I find being in a room where you can kind of like go live on, you have a big board in front of you. It's really cool. As well as really like a class with Liam Mitchell called just Intro to Media and Society in second year. And it just like really made me excited about media studies. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Shameless plug, Trent Radio is producer-oriented radio for students and is free of charge. As someone who was an executive producer for a couple of years, it is a great way to find your voice. It's a great way to find and, you know, kind of channel your passions into something, again, that could reach Lord knows who. So definitely check it out if that is something that you're interested in. But it does seem that we have reached the end of our session. On behalf of myself and the university, I want to thank Joshua and Asha for being here today, sharing your wisdom, your insight, your knowledge, and your experience on a program that I think is pretty safe to say means a lot to all of us in this panel as well. And I also want to thank every single one of you folks that joined this session as well, for asking your questions, for being so interactive. I think this is one of the most interactive chats I've had in quite some time. So it's always refreshing to see that students are eager and are excited, like I said, for that next chapter in their academic career. So with that being said, enjoy the rest of our open house. Ask as many questions as you can, and remember, you are exactly where you need to be. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.